there are growing calls for the government to launch an immediate inquiry into child exploitation in Britain. Calls that come despite the fact that no such action was taken during 14 years in power. At the same time, Sir Keir Starmer is facing renewed criticism over his handling of the Oldham grooming gang scandal during his tenure as head of the Crown Prosecution Service. His leadership of the Labour Party is now under intense and sustained scrutiny. Both inside and outside the party, the atmosphere is increasingly turbulent. A figure once presented as Labour's unifying force is now viewed by many as its central liability. The signs are no longer subtle. They are visible, measurable, and politically significant. In recent weeks, the party has been rocked by multiple instances of mass council resignations. Alongside that, fresh reporting on Starmer's time at the CPs has brought forward allegations and details that cast a shadow over his period as Director of Public Prosecutions. The controversies are no longer isolated incidents, they are accumulating. Labour now faces simultaneous internal disorder and mounting external criticism, pressures that could have serious consequences for the Prime Minister's political trajectory. From coordinated council walkouts to renewed examination of prosecutorial decisions made under his leadership, the challenges are converging. For a government still early in its mandate, this is a precarious position. While politics is inherently unpredictable, it is reasonable to conclude that both Labour and Starmer are entering a sustained period of political turbulence, one that may last months, not weeks. Starmer has defended his record robustly. He points to 5 years at the helm of the CPs, arguing that his record is publicly available and open to scrutiny. He maintains that he reformed systems he believed were failing, preferring institutional change over public commentary. On the deeply sensitive issue of grooming gangs, he has emphasized the severity of the crimes, describing the abuse as unspeakable and insisting that reforms were implemented to prevent recurrence. He has stated that one of his motivations for entering politics was the belief that systemic failures required political solutions. However, the political challenge he now faces extends well beyond past prosecutorial decisions. It is rooted in the present cohesion, or lack of it, within his own party. Around 20 members of the Broxtowe Borough Council Labour Group, including Council Leader Milan Radulovic, have resigned in protest. Their accusation is clear. They believe Starmer has abandoned core Labour values. In a joint statement, they cited a series of policy decisions they consider betrayals, means testing winter fuel payments, the handling of the WASPI women's pension issue, maintaining the 2-child benefit cap, increases in bus fares, and what they describe as a weak response to Israel's actions in Gaza. Their statement was unequivocal. They argued that this is not the Labour Party they campaigned for, nor the one voters were promised. Instead of transformative change, they contend, the government has targeted the vulnerable while leaving entrenched interests largely untouched. These councillors have formed a new group, the Broxtowe Independents, and have been joined by a county councillor and approximately 100 additional members departing the party. Collectively, they represent more than 200 years of Labour membership. This was not an impulsive protest. It was, by their own account, a considered and coordinated response to what they view as ideological drift. The consequences are immediate and tangible. Labour has lost overall control of Broxtowe Borough Council, a council it only secured in 2023. But this development is not simply a localized dispute. It reflects a broader unease within Labour's grassroots. When long-standing members publicly sever ties, it signals more than policy disagreement. It suggests an identity crisis. One departing councillor, Ross Bowfinger, symbolically cut up his Labour membership card and posted the image online, stating that the party had grown increasingly distant from ordinary people. That sentiment is being echoed, quietly and publicly across multiple regions. Criticism has also intensified regarding Starmer's record on grooming gang prosecutions. Opponents argue that key recommendations from prior inquiries have not been fully implemented, and that no comprehensive national inquiry has yet been convened. The exchanges have been heated, at times chaotic, reflecting the depth of feelings surrounding the issue. What is increasingly clear is that these problems are not confined to one council or one controversy. They are national in scope. Labour's support, already under strain in post-election polling, faces additional pressure as these issues converge. At the centre of it all is the Oldham grooming gang scandal, one of the most disturbing criminal failures in recent British history. The current debate is less about the crimes themselves, which are widely acknowledged as horrific, and more about how institutions responded. Reports have described systemic failures by local authorities and law enforcement during the period when Starmer led the CPS. While the CPS was responsible for approving serious charges, critics highlight delays and cases that were not pursued. Those renewed revelations have prompted fresh demands for a full national inquiry. Among those leading the charge are Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch and Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. They argue that Parliament must confront what they describe as one of the worst scandals in modern British history, and that MPs in affected constituencies should support a national investigation. The issue has reached the floor of the House of Commons, where tempers have flared and the stakes have been made clear. This is not a peripheral political dispute. It is a matter that resonates deeply with constituents across the country. In short, the Labour government faces a convergence of crises, internal fragmentation, ideological dissent, economic pressure, and renewed scrutiny of past institutional decisions. Whether Starmer can reassert control, both of his party and the broader political narrative will define the next phase of his premiership. While the controversies already outlined help explain Labour's declining performance in post-election polling, the party's difficulties run deeper than headlines alone suggest. What we are witnessing is not merely a reaction to isolated decisions, but growing internal fragmentation. There are clear factions emerging within Labour, driven largely by dissatisfaction with Sir Keir Starmer's perceived indecisiveness and frustration over a series of political missteps. This is particularly striking given the scale of Labour's electoral mandate. After securing a landslide victory, expectations were high. Voters were promised renewal, stability, and economic competence. Yet by several key measures, conditions have not improved. In some respects, they have deteriorated. The government has already signalled that the October budget will be painful. The Prime Minister has framed it as unavoidable, arguing that those with the broadest shoulders must carry the heavier burden. Measures include a crackdown on non-domiciled tax arrangements and strengthened regulatory powers over water companies. Steps presented as necessary to repair what Labour describes as inherited damage. However, the broader economic picture remains challenging. Years of underinvestment and political instability have left the UK economy fragile. Under Starmer's leadership, inflationary pressures persist and the cost of living crisis continues to weigh heavily on households. Critics argue that the government's rhetoric has outpaced its results. Ministers speak repeatedly of growth and ambition, positioning economic expansion as the central test of their administration. Growth, they insist, is the shared national mission. The Prime Minister has made clear that stimulating growth is his overriding priority. He frames it as a unifying objective, one that binds businesses and government alike. But the political reality is straightforward. Without tangible economic improvement, that message risks sounding aspirational rather than operational. More significantly, many observers note the absence of a defining strategic shift. Rather than charting a bold new course to move Britain beyond the legacy of austerity and the economic aftershocks of Brexit, the government's most concrete action to date has been the substantial reduction of a winter fuel support program relied upon by elderly citizens. For a party that campaigned on social justice and protection for vulnerable groups, this has proved politically contentious. The refusal to scrap the two-child benefit limit has further intensified criticism. During his 2020 leadership campaign, Starmer pledged sweeping reform of the welfare system. He spoke of ending punitive sanctions, abolishing the two-child cap, reforming work capability assessments, and dismantling elements of universal credit that he described as inhumane. Yet, in a July interview with the BBC's Laura Koonsberg, he confirmed that Labour would not reverse the two-child limit introduced under the Conservatives. That decision has sparked anger among campaigners and unease within his own ranks, reinforcing accusations of policy reversal and diluted principle. Compounding this is the sensitive issue of taxation. Pre-election assurances that taxes would not rise have been followed by signals that increases may in fact be unavoidable. For voters already grappling with higher living costs, such shifts deepen skepticism and erode trust. Taken together, these developments help explain why the Prime Minister's approval ratings are under pressure. Political capital, even after a landslide, is not unlimited. It depends on delivery, clarity of direction, and consistency between promise and policy. Starmer now faces a demanding political landscape. He must stabilize his party, reassure wavering supporters, and demonstrate measurable economic progress, all while navigating fiscal constraints and global uncertainty. Rebuilding public confidence will require more than rhetoric about growth. It will require outcomes that households can see and feel. The central question is no longer whether Labour inherited serious challenges. It undoubtedly did. The question is whether its leadership can convincingly demonstrate that it is improving conditions rather than presiding over further strain. That is the political test now confronting Downing Street.